What if I told you that happiness isn't something you need to find, earn, or build the right circumstances around? What if the reason you're not consistently happy right now has nothing to do with your job, your relationships, your finances, or anything happening out there in the world, and everything to do with something happening inside you? That's the central idea Michael A. Singer explores in Chapter 15 of the Untethered Soul, a chapter simply called The Path of Unconditional Happiness. And it's one of those ideas that sounds almost too simple when you first hear it. But the more you sit with it, the more it quietly dismantles everything you thought you knew about why you feel the way you feel. Most of us have been running a kind of unconscious negotiation with life. We say things like, "I'll be happy when this happens," or "I'll feel at peace once that's resolved." We've handed our happiness over to conditions we don't fully control. This chapter asks you to see that clearly, and then asks you something harder. What if you made a different choice? Let's walk through it together. Singer opens this chapter by pointing to something we rarely question, the basic assumption that our happiness depends on what happens to us. We've all built mental lists, whether consciously or not, of what needs to be in place before we allow ourselves to feel genuinely okay. The relationship needs to be stable, the finances need to be figured out, the health scare needs to be resolved, the career needs to be on track. And when those things are in place, for a moment we do feel a kind of relief. But then something else comes up. There's always something else. Singer calls this out directly. He says most people spend their entire lives trying to arrange and rearrange the external world to protect their inner peace. And it never fully works. Because the external world is not something we can permanently control. Circumstances shift, people change, things fall apart in ways we didn't anticipate. And if your happiness is built on top of conditions that are always in motion, then your happiness is always in motion too. That's an exhausting way to live. What Singer is pointing to here is that conditional happiness isn't really happiness at all. It's more like temporary relief. It's the brief pause between one problem and the next. The path of unconditional happiness begins with recognizing this pattern clearly, not with judgment, but with honest awareness. You have to see the cage before you can walk out of it. If you've been following this book from the beginning, you'll be familiar with Singer's concept of the inner roommate, that constant voice inside your head that narrates, criticizes, worries, plans, and judges. In this chapter, Singer revisits that voice in the context of happiness and shows us something important. The inner roommate is a machine that generates conditions. It is always telling you what needs to happen, what needs to change, what you need to have or avoid in order for things to finally feel okay. It might sound like, once I get through this week, I'll relax. Or, if she would just understand me, I'd feel better. Or, when I finally have enough saved, then I can breathe. The voice is relentless. And here's what Singer wants you to notice. Even when those conditions are met, the voice doesn't go quiet. It just generates new ones. The goalposts always move. This is because the inner roommate's job is not actually to help you become happy. Its job is to protect you from discomfort. And in doing that job, it keeps you in a permanent state of negotiation with life. Singer is clear that you are not this voice. You are the one who is aware of it. And the moment you realize that, you create space between yourself and the conditions it keeps insisting on. That space, that awareness, is where real freedom begins. Here's where Singer's teaching starts to feel genuinely radical. He makes the case that happiness is not something you need to create. It's something you need to stop blocking. Think about that for a moment. The natural state of the human being, when the mind is quiet and nothing is being resisted, is actually quite peaceful. You've probably noticed this in moments that surprised you. A quiet morning, a walk outside, a moment when you weren't thinking about anything in particular and you just felt fine. More than fine. Present. Singer says those moments aren't accidents. They're glimpses of what's underneath all the noise. The practice he's pointing to in this chapter is learning to release resistance and judgment as they arise. Not to force yourself to feel happy, but to stop actively blocking the natural flow of well-being that's already there. This sounds simple, but it requires a kind of ongoing inner work. Every time you notice yourself tensing against something, against a person's behavior, against a situation, against something that didn't go the way you wanted, Singer invites you to consciously relax, to let it pass through rather than grip it and analyze it and build a case around it. This is not passivity. It's not pretending things don't matter. It's recognizing that your resistance to an experience is often more painful than the experience itself, and that you have a choice about whether to hold on or let go. One of the most clarifying things Singer does in this chapter is explain exactly why the strategy of controlling external circumstances in order to feel happy will always fall short. And it comes down to this: the number of variables in the external world is infinite. People will behave in ways you didn't plan for. Events will unfold outside your control. Your own preferences will change over time. To try and arrange all of that into a configuration that permanently satisfies the inner roommate is an impossible task, and yet most of us are quietly dedicating enormous energy to trying. Singer describes this as building walls instead of developing inner freedom. Every condition you set becomes a wall you have to maintain. Don't let this happen. Don't let that person say that. Keep this in place. Prevent that from changing. And the more walls you build, the smaller your world becomes. The path of unconditional happiness is not about getting more control. It's about needing less of it. It's about building a relationship with yourself that's stable enough that you're not completely at the mercy of what happens around you. Singer is honest that this is a practice, not a switch you flip. But the direction matters. Every time you catch yourself trying to manipulate circumstances to protect your comfort, you can pause and ask, what would it feel like to simply be okay with this? Not resigned to it, not defeated by it, just genuinely open to it. That question alone begins to loosen the grip. Singer closes this chapter with the heart of the whole teaching. The path of unconditional happiness is not a path outward, it's a path inward. It is the ongoing practice of surrender and acceptance, not as spiritual buzzwords, but as a lived moment-to-moment orientation toward life. To surrender doesn't mean you stop caring or stop taking action. It means you stop fighting with reality as it is. It means you let what is happening actually happen, and you deal with it from a place of openness rather than resistance. Singer says when you make the commitment to be happy regardless of what happens, you're not making a naive promise. You're making a profound one. You're saying that your inner state is no longer for sale to external circumstances. That is a radical act of inner freedom. And what becomes available when you live this way is something Singer describes as a natural wellspring of joy and love that exists within you, beneath all the noise. It was never missing. It was just covered over by the constant activity of the conditioned mind. The work of the path of unconditional happiness is simply the steady, patient uncovering of what was always there. This chapter doesn't promise it's easy, but it does suggest clearly that it's possible, and that it may be the most important thing you ever choose to pursue. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with this chapter today. These ideas deserve to be held slowly, not rushed. I'd genuinely love to know, where in your own life do you notice yourself setting conditions on your happiness? What's the thing you keep telling yourself you need before you'll finally feel okay? Drop it in the comments. There's something powerful about naming it out loud. If this resonated with you, the full book, The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, goes so much deeper, and I'd highly recommend picking it up. And if you want to keep exploring chapters like this one, subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next. Take care of yourself.